It's Pat and Stu for Glenn, who's got some back issues today. Hopefully he'll be back tomorrow. 888-727-BECK. So a year later, looking at some of the inaccurate predictions about what would happen during the COVID pandemic. It's hard to believe that every prediction wasn't exactly accurate, but apparently they weren't all accurate.
Really?
Yeah. The 2.2 million deaths hasn't turned out to be accurate, for one thing.
That's true. Although the 2.2, to be fair, the 2.2 million deaths was if we did nothing.
Yes.
Which is
okay.
A literally impossible situation. It's like at some point someone's going, when there's 2.15 million people dead, someone's staying home from work. So there is really no world in which it's a pointless prediction. But yes, that did not come close to coming true.
But some of the predictions, like Andrew Cuomo, who I think you've heard of him. Have you not?
Well, I've heard Andrew Cuomo was awful. .com. I've heard that.
You have heard that.
That's the main thing I've heard, yes, about him.
Apparently, based on some epidemiological curve at the time, he said in 45 days, the state could have up to 110,000 beds that people need, compared to our current capacity of 53,000. He also said 37,000 ICU units would be necessary and ventilators, and they only had 3,000 ventilators at the time. So what really did happen? Well, the hospitalizations in the state didn't quite reach 110,000. They were at 19,000, just under 19,000.
Not 119,000.
Not 119, 19,000. Somewhat less than 110.
I don't think there is a bigger area in which these predictions missed, and Cuomo was probably the most guilty of this, but
so bad.
These were widespread. When it comes to hospitalizations and ventilations, I mean, they were way, way off. A big portion of that, the problem was the CDC, who was giving these recommendations as to how many hospital beds and ventilators and all these other things
and
that would
ICU
be associated.
Units.
Yeah, that would be associated with each death. Then they were just so wrong on it. Now, the death numbers, their predictions weren't nearly as bad. I mean, some of them, the 2.2 million, as you mentioned, was kind of that. But that was from the London one, right? The Imperial College of London,
yes.
I believe it was 2.2 million. It was. And they said the numbers, if we did mitigation efforts, could be, over 250,000, which obviously, that turned out to be true. There's a guy in the New York Times they highlighted that it was in March, and he said 480,000 deaths, but that could be conservative. And we're at 560 or something now,
somewhere in there,
something like that.
Yeah.
So
it slowed way down though, fortunately.
Yeah, thank God. I mean, we're now down to from where it was. We're now back to our summer peak numbers, and it's coming way down. Remember, deaths lag a few weeks from actual cases, so that number's going to continue to come down over the next few weeks. So
of the 37,000 ICU units, Cuomo said they'd need. They actually had 5,225. 13% of the forecast. 13%. Same thing was happening.
And remember, this is his justification for the nursing home situation.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, we're going to get so many people that come into the ICUs. We're going to have to clear those out. We got to send these people back to the nursing homes, and everything will be fine.
Yeah. And remember the big hospital ship he demanded that Trump move into the New York harbor, which the president accommodated at the time. They moved that giant hospital ship, which I think had 6,000?
Sounds about right.
Beds available?
It was thousands, yeah.
They used 5.
These 5,000.
People. Just
5,000?
No, 5.
Just 500?
Just 5.0. 5 people.
5 decimal point?
Ever used the hospital ship. No, 5. Just 5 people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Which one?
People.
Which one was the best use, though, of those 5? Can you point to? And we should again.
I don't know.
I don't mean to hammer Andrew Cuomo because I'm not the type of person.
No, you're not. To make something out of that, you would never make a mountain out of a molehill.
No, and we know that. I'm making a mountain out of a mountain here.
Yeah.
This is what I'm doing. But a Brooklyn nursing home, which had lots of death. Wrote to and specifically requested and said, hey, we've got these people coming back from hospitals. they still have COVID. I know your directive says we have to take them, but hey, do you mind? Can we send them over to the completely empty ship, which is like a few miles away?
And why would you say no to that?
Right. And
Isn't
they did.
that what it was for?
They rejected it. And so these people went back into the nursing home.
It doesn't make any sense to me,
and it killed people in the nursing home.
Do we know? I mean, is there a thought, or have they explained that at all? Because I've never heard the explanation, if there is one. That no, we want them at the nursing home infecting older people. That's what we want.
Their stated explanation is that they were expecting this wave of people to show up, and they wanted to have room for them when they did. I mean, again, it's a terrible justification because this was playing out all over the country. At the time, we had seen that these numbers were a little lower. And I can understand if you have a wave, you have to come up with another way to deal with it. Now, it does not justify sending them back to the nursing homes with the most vulnerable people.
Not at all.
Facilities that wrote to Cuomo and said specifically, we do not have the ability to treat these patients. We do not have the ability to separate them. Many of these nursing homes do not have private rooms. So they were sending them back into rooms with other people that weren't infected.
My gosh.
And think of how bad this is. Not to mention you had all of the issues with, they didn't have the appropriate PPE. They're not a facility that's designed to deal with a pandemic. That's not what they do. Right. It's not a hospital. So like if you could say theoretically, right, if this wave of new patients came in and they felt like these people were on the right end of COVID, those still contagious, maybe, they had to get them out of there. If they had waited for that and pushed them back to the nursing homes, you could at least say, okay, well, they got overwhelmed and they had nothing they could do. Now, certainly a person who writes a freaking book about leadership wouldn't use that excuse, right? Someone who's in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic writing a freaking book about leadership in the time of a pandemic wouldn't say, oh, we're overwhelmed. What are we going to do?
And how well he handled the whole thing.
Yeah. And that
was the book.
The book. Yeah. And again, he was correct in that he was a leader. He was a leader in these policies that killed thousands of seniors. He did lead in that way. He was uniquely bad in the United States of America for a governor. But you could at least justify the policy if he waited until the wave came. He preemptively emptied the beds and put them back into nursing homes. And, the death toll is gigantic, including rejecting totally reasonable requests from nursing homes to say, hey, we've been reading about this giant ship. Hey, the Javits Center that you prepared for COVID patients? There's no one in it. What do you say maybe we put the patients there instead of around the ones here that aren't contagious?
No reason not to.
No reason not to.
And yet they didn't. They wouldn't do it.
And we should point out on this book, number one, they had a report that came in about these nursing home deaths. And we now know that his top aides went in there and edited the actual number of nursing home deaths out of the report. That is not a question anymore. Wow. That is known. Wow. That they went in there and edited it out, obviously for politics. That edit happened 4 days before his first public comments about his book. 4 days. So it's incredibly clear to me, Pat, that this is what was going on. That he knew this book thing was coming. He knew he wanted to cash in and make millions of dollars. And so he lied and edited this report so that we wouldn't know how bad of a job he did. And in addition to that, we should note on the book, I saw a stat the other day that he had sold, I looked at this, I had to read it like 2 or 3 times because the first time I'm like, did he really only sell 400 books in a week? I was like, that's what it was. I think it was this one, I looked at it, I was like, wow, 400 books, that's it in an entire week? And then I reread the sentence, and no, it was 400 books in an entire month plus. It was like a month and a week.
Gotta be kidding
It was like,
wow.
400, I mean, selling nationwide, like 5 or 10 books a day is the pace.
That is a breakneck pace right there.
Yes, really.
Right there.
Think of that. So the book has been, had this big launch at the beginning, and I think it sold something like 45,000 copies since the beginning.
Altogether.
Remember, this is when he was in
Yeah.
a huge praise period of his governorship, and he got a 7-figure, they say low to mid 7-figure bonus on this. There's no way he's going to earn that out. I mean, this is another miserable failure. These book companies keep complaining about people not buying books. Oh, I don't know. Maybe not give out 7-figure advances to these dolts.
Yeah.
That cannot do anything as far as sales.
Strangely, though, on the Cuomo front, there's somebody who actually noticed a little something about the Cuomo brothers, both of the awful Cuomo brothers, Chris and Andrew. Eric Wemple of the Washington Post was on CNN over the weekend, and he actually commented on CNN's love-a-thon between the two of them. Thank you for noticing. That's, one of those rare instances of some journalistic integrity where he's actually calling out CNN on CNN. You never see that.
Did Brian Stelter respond to that? I didn't hear the response.
I didn't either.
I'm curious.
They cut it right there
because it is one of those things that is so obvious. It's such a blatant disregard for any journalistic integrity. The CNN, the love-a-thons he talked about, did over 10 of those interviews. Over 10 of them. First of all, they were always from the beginning horrible. There was never anything endearing about them. They were always horrible.
Embarrassing.
But they had a 6-year ban in place for Chris Cuomo to interview Andrew Cuomo. 6 years. And they withdrew the ban during the most important story of all of our lifetimes.
Wow.
And then they're like, well, arguably, certainly in CNN's lifetime.
Yeah.
And then they take it off when Cuomo, it's not about even the sexual harassment stuff, which he deserves questions on, but it's also the same story. It's the nursing home thing. It was happening at the time they were doing the interviews.
Yeah.
And now they're like, oh, well, now we've reinstituted the ban. And none of these, I have not heard extensive coverage about Cuomo and the disregard of that, of those standards. They have talked about Cuomo and his nursing home thing. They've talked about CNN as a network has talked about the sexual harassment stuff. They've talked about it, but they have not put that side by side with how they were dealing with the coverage at the time, which is the important part when it comes to CNN. You threw journalism completely out of the window because you thought the Cuomo brothers were funny together, and because you wanted to give Andrew Cuomo a pass, which he received for 8 months. And now finally, the other media sources, largely more like the New York Times, and certainly the New York Post has been on this the whole time, but the Times and the Times Union and some of these other papers have finally started to pick up on this stuff recently. But they gave him a complete pass.
Yeah.
I'm glad somebody called them out.